when Ethan Cole, a quiet single dad from a forgotten Midwestern town, boarded the morning train. He was only thinking about keeping food on the table and getting through another day. But fate had other plans. In a matter of seconds, that train derailed into chaos, and Ethan's instincts kicked in. Amid smoke, fire, and twisted steel, he pulled a stranger from the wreckage with seconds to spare. He didn't ask for thanks, interviews, or fame. He just went home to his daughter Lily, thinking life would go on as usual. Days later, a private jet lands outside his dusty town, and everything changes. The woman he saved, not just a survivor, but the estranged daughter of a global media billionaire. And she hasn't stopped thinking about the man who risked his life to save hers. Now, Ethan is swept into a whirlwind of private islands, powerful families, and a life-altering offer. But can a humble man with a haunted past accept the weight of destiny? Or will he walk away from the opportunity of a lifetime? This is a story of courage, unexpected love, second chances, and the quiet kind of heroism that changes lives, and maybe the world. The morning sun peeked over the rooftops of Brookside, a town too small to be found on most maps, but big enough to feel heavy with dreams deferred. It was 6:14 a.m. when Ethan Cole rolled out of bed, careful not to wake his daughter Lily. The thermostat read 59 degrees, too cold for late spring, but the oil heater had been finicky for months. He threw on the same worn flannel shirt and jeans from yesterday, brushing the creases out with the flat of his hands. No time to fuss over appearances. Downstairs, he started the coffee maker and checked his phone. One notification, a reminder for a job interview in the city, his third one this month. No callbacks yet, but today was different. It wasn't just a warehouse shift or a delivery job. It was at a nonprofit office in downtown Chicago, handling logistics. Not glamorous, but full-time and with benefits. A chance to stop juggling side gigs, to stop telling Lily, maybe next month. He poured his coffee into a chipped thermos and packed a sandwich, half for him and half for Lily's lunchbox. Money was tight, always tight. Upstairs, the creak of the stairs announced Lily's entrance, sleepy-eyed, sock-footed, and clutching her stuffed dinosaur, Rexy. "You going to the city today?" she asked through a yawn. Ethan smiled, kneeling down to zip up her coat. "Yep, big day. You'll be at Mrs. Torres's until I'm back, okay?" Lily nodded solemnly. At 8 years old, she was used to her father being in a rush, always trying to be two people at once. She had inherited her mother's calm eyes and Ethan's resilience, even if she didn't know it yet. He kissed her forehead. "Be good. And if she offers cookies, just say yes. No hesitation." She giggled. That sound, that one sound, kept Ethan going through everything. After dropping Lily off at the neighbor's, Ethan caught the 7:05 train from Platform B. He sat near the back window seat, backpack clutched in his lap like a security blanket. He had $37 in his wallet, counting change. Just enough for a round trip and maybe a vending machine lunch. As the train began to move, he exhaled. For the next hour and 20 minutes, he was just another face among strangers. It felt oddly peaceful. He stared out the window, watching farmland blur into suburbs, then industrial ruins, and eventually the distant silhouette of the city skyline. A conductor checked tickets. A teenage boy tapped a rhythm on his knee. A woman across the aisle scribbled furiously in a notebook. Ethan noticed her, Long chestnut hair, business suit, but eyes that darted nervously, like she was holding her breath in a room with no oxygen. He thought of saying something, but decided against it. People carried burdens they didn't unpack for strangers. The ride continued, uneventful. Or so he thought. At exactly 8:29 a.m., the train began to shudder. At first, it felt like a brake check, or maybe uneven tracks. Then came the screeching, metal grinding. People looked up. The air shifted. Something was wrong. Before anyone could react, the world upended. The train screamed as it derailed, cars folding, glass exploding, bodies flung like rag dolls. Ethan's seat slammed sideways. He hit the floor hard. Somewhere someone was screaming, then smoke, the stench of gasoline and panic. Ethan forced himself up, ignoring the searing pain in his shoulder. He crawled through twisted seats and crushed bodies, ears ringing. Fire had ignited in the middle car. Someone shouted, "Help!" again and again. He stumbled towards the voice. The woman with the notebook was pinned, legs trapped beneath a crushed bench. Her notebook lay open, pages fluttering like desperate wings. Her face was streaked with blood and soot. "Hold on!" he shouted, adrenaline dulling the pain in his limbs. With brute strength and desperation, Ethan wedged himself between the wreckage, using a metal pole as leverage. The bench shifted. He pulled her free, just as the flames reached the ceiling. They crawled out together, coughing and trembling, collapsing on gravel and scorched grass 20 feet from the wreck. Then silence. Not complete silence. Sirens in the distance, cries, the roar of flames, but a silence between them, an unspoken acknowledgement of survival. She looked at him with disbelief, then gratitude, then something deeper. Ethan didn't wait for thanks. He stood, gave her a nod, and limped away to help others. Because that's who he was. Because that's what fathers do. Ethan hadn't even realized how tightly he'd been gripping his backpack until he tried to open his bruised fingers. Sitting on the embankment beside the mangled train, he finally let it fall to the ground beside him. Smoke curled into the sky like a warning to the heavens, black against the pale blue morning. Sirens wailed in the distance, too late to prevent the wreck, but maybe in time to save what was left. His flannel shirt was torn at the shoulder, caked with ash and blood. Not all of it is his. He could still feel the pressure of the woman's arm around his neck as he dragged her from the fire. She hadn't said a word after he got her out, just stared as if trying to memorize his face. Ethan didn't wait around for interviews or applause. The moment emergency responders started arriving, he quietly slipped away to the edge of the field where he collapsed on a patch of grass. The shock was beginning to set in. His limbs trembled without warning. The adrenaline was wearing off, and in its place came pain, exhaustion, and a strange numbness that crept into his chest like frost. He wasn't supposed to be here. He was supposed to be in the city, on time for his interview, at 9:15. This train, the 7:05 Express, was his ticket to a new beginning. Now all he had were smoke, sirens, and a missed opportunity. Ethan dug his phone from his jacket pocket. Miraculously, it still worked. 1 bar of service. A text from Mrs. Torres arrived 15 minutes ago. "Lily is doing great. Don't worry about anything." He exhaled and allowed himself a small smile. That was the most important thing. Lily was safe. He stared at the wreckage as fire crews tried to extinguish the burning car. Ambulances lined up like toy trucks along the side road. People were being loaded onto stretchers. Some walked, others didn't. News vans started pulling in. A man with a camera over his shoulder pointed at Ethan. "There, that guy, he was pulling people out. I saw him." Ethan turned and quickly stood. His legs protested. Pain shot through his right knee. He forced himself to walk, limp, really, toward the far end of the field, away from the reporters. He didn't need this. He didn't want the world digging into his life, asking questions he had no time to answer. His only priority now was getting home. On the road, a volunteer with a first aid vest tried to stop him. "Sir, you need to be checked out. There's triage on the—" "I'm fine," Ethan said, not breaking stride. "Thank you." He kept walking, past the sirens and the flashing lights. He didn't stop until he reached the gas station about half a mile up the road. There, he used the cracked screen of his phone to book a rideshare back home. It cost him nearly everything in his bank account. But it didn't matter. As he sat in the back seat of the car, staring out the window at the endless stretch of highway, he thought about the woman's eyes, the way she looked at him. Not like a victim, not even like someone who'd been saved, but like someone who saw him, truly saw him in that moment of chaos. He'd never forget that. Back home in Brookside, the world was quieter. The rusted-out mailbox still leaned at the same crooked angle. The screen door still creaked. Inside, their little two-bedroom house looked untouched by the outside world. Safe, ordinary, familiar. Mrs. Torres greeted him with a concerned look when he picked up Lily. "I saw the news," she whispered. "Was that your train?" He nodded. She shook her head slowly, eyes wide. "Miracle you made it out alive." He said nothing. Lily, unaware of what had happened, ran to him with open arms. He knelt to catch her, wincing as her arms wrapped around his bruised shoulders. "You okay, Daddy?" she asked, muffled against his neck. "Yeah, baby," he whispered. "I'm okay now." That night, after Lily had gone to bed and the house was still, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with an ice pack on his knee and a cup of lukewarm coffee in front of him. He turned on the TV, flipping to the local news. And while many passengers have been transported to nearby hospitals, one man has been credited with pulling at least 3 survivors from the wreckage. Authorities have not yet identified him. They showed grainy footage, smoke, fire, chaos, and a figure dragging a woman through shattered glass. He watched himself on screen, barely recognizable. No name, no interview, just a blurry ghost of a man doing what needed to be done. And for now, that was exactly how Ethan wanted it. Let's begin with the continuation of your story. Here's the full version of Ethan had always believed there was something sacred about silence, not the silence of absence, but the kind that lived between strangers sharing space. A train car, for example, each person existing in their bubble, every glance carefully managed. That morning before the wreck, it had been just such a silence. He sat 2 rows from the back, his body heavy with the fatigue of survival. His mind ticked over the interview ahead. Logistics assistant, 9 to 5, a paycheck, a chance to stabilize the teetering life he'd built with Lily. It wasn't about ambition anymore. It was about survival. Across the aisle, in the next car, visible through the connecting doors window, sat a woman who didn't quite belong. She wasn't dressed like a commuter, no earbuds, no laptop, no travel mug. She wore a trim, tailored coat and clutched a slim, leather-bound notebook in her lap like it was a lifeline. Her eyes never settled, 1 minute on the floor, the next on her hands, then on the sky flashing past outside. Something about her unsettled him. Not her beauty, though she had that too in a cold, distant sort of way, but her tension. She looked like someone trying not to cry on a plane, the kind of woman holding in 1,000 words she had no place to say out loud. She noticed him once. Their eyes met for less than a second. Her expression didn't change. Ethan turned back to the window, telling himself it was none of his business. People ran from things every day. Maybe she was just another lost soul searching for a destination, more emotional than physical. He knew what that looked like. He lived it. The ride rolled on. Stop after stop. People got off. More people boarded. The woman didn't move. She just stared, her fingers gripping the edge of her notebook so tightly her knuckles turned white. Ethan checked the time. 32 minutes until arrival. He reached into his bag for a protein bar, unwrapped it, and took a bite. The taste was forgettable, but it calmed his stomach. He hadn't eaten much before leaving. The car swayed slightly. Nothing unusual. Then something strange happened. The woman stood abruptly, her notebook dropping to the floor with a soft slap. She didn't pick it up. Her hands trembled slightly. She walked toward the back door connecting to Ethan's car, but stopped short, like she'd changed her mind. She turned and sat down again, this time facing the window. Ethan watched her in the reflection of the glass. She was muttering something to herself, short, choppy phrases. He couldn't make out the words. A conductor passed through asking for tickets. She handed hers over without looking up. The conductor frowned slightly but moved on. Ethan's instincts whispered again. Something was wrong. Not just with her, but with the whole moment. It had the feel of a paused breath before a scream. He leaned forward, peering through the gap between the cars. She looked toward the window again, but her shoulders slumped slightly, like defeat had finally found her. For a moment he considered standing up, asking her if she was okay. Something simple. But the train jolted, breaking his concentration. His phone buzzed. Another calendar notification for his interview. He cleared it and looked back up. The woman was gone. He blinked. Looked again. She had disappeared from her seat. He stood slightly, scanning the next car. Nothing. No sign of her. Then a flash of movement to the left. She had moved to the connecting vestibule between the cars, her coat flapping behind her like wings caught in the wind. Ethan stood now, real concern pushing past his hesitation. Was she having a breakdown, planning to jump? He moved toward the door between the cars just as the train hit a long curve. It groaned, the floor shifting under his feet. Suddenly, everything changed. The world seemed to tilt. Metal screamed. Windows exploded inward. Ethan was thrown sideways into the aisle wall, and all went black for a moment. When he opened his eyes, the train was no longer moving. It was broken, twisted, burning, and somewhere through the wreckage and smoke, the woman from the next car was screaming. The moment the train lifted from the tracks, the laws of reality seemed to fall away. There was no warning, no announcement, just the violent lurch, like a monster underneath the earth had suddenly decided to shake the steel loose from its spine. Ethan's body slammed into the seats, then the aisle wall. Screams erupted all around him, metal squealing louder than any human voice. Overhead luggage broke free and flew like missiles. The lights flickered and the world turned into fragments, snapshots of terror between bursts of blinding chaos. He braced as the car spun, then toppled onto its side. Time slowed, then sped up. He wasn't sure which. When the movement finally stopped, all he could hear was the sharp hiss of something leaking and the crackle of fire. Ethan was on his back, glass in his shoulder, something wet dripping down the side of his face. He coughed, the air thick with smoke and the smell of fuel. He groaned and sat up slowly, ignoring the fire-like pain in his ribs. The train was a ruin. Seats were twisted, windows gone. A wall of fire flickered near the back. Then he heard her. The woman from the next car, the one with the notebook, was screaming. Without hesitation, Ethan crawled across the warped aisle. He kicked out the bent emergency door and pulled himself into the connecting car. Heat blasted his face. The air shimmered from the intensity of the flames. Debris was everywhere. She was trapped under a metal bench, her coat torn, face bloodied. "Help me," she cried, voice cracking with fear. "I've got you," Ethan shouted. He forced his aching body toward her, each step a battle against pain and instinct. Flames crept closer. Smoke was thickening. He couldn't see more than a few feet. The bench was pinning her by the legs. She was conscious but in agony, her hands gripping the twisted metal. Ethan dropped to his knees and wedged his shoulder under the edge. He pushed. Nothing. He adjusted, found better footing, and pushed again. The bench groaned. With a burst of strength and adrenaline, he lifted it just enough. "Slide out," he yelled. She didn't hesitate. The moment she was clear, the bench crashed back down. She collapsed into his arms, sobbing. "Come on," he whispered. "We've got to move." He half carried, half dragged her back through the door he'd come from. The flames were spreading faster now, licking the ceiling, devouring everything behind them. When they tumbled out of the car, he rolled them both onto the grass slope beside the tracks. They coughed, gasping for air. Her hand clung to his shirt like she might fall apart without the anchor. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then her voice, soft and trembling, "You saved my life." He looked at her, really looked. Beneath the blood and ash, her face was striking. Not from beauty, but from something more, some buried weight she carried even now. "You're okay," he said, more to reassure himself than her. Sirens were drawing closer. People were shouting. Another explosion rattled the wreckage behind them, but they were alive. Ethan didn't stay. Once he was sure she was safe and others were approaching, he stood and limped toward the other survivors, offering help where he could. He didn't want thanks. He didn't want cameras. He just wanted to go home. The news coverage began within hours. Helicopters circled overhead, their lenses capturing wide shots of twisted train cars and paramedics moving among the ruins. Aerial images showed fire-scorched metal, shattered glass, and the thick trail of black smoke rising into the morning sky. Local and national stations cut into regular programming to cover the Brookside train catastrophe. But buried beneath the horror was another story, one told in whispers between survivors and confirmed by first responders. A man, unidentified, had pulled at least 3 people from the wreckage. They called him the Ghost Hero. Footage from a survivor showed a man with ash-streaked skin dragging a woman from the flames. The image wasn't clear, the angles were poor, but his face was visible for just a second. One frozen frame in a sea of pixels. Enough to stir curiosity, enough for the world to start asking questions. Back in Brookside, Ethan ignored all of it. He spent the day icing his shoulder, avoiding calls, and answering Lily's questions with practiced calm. "You fell off the train?" she asked. Sort of, he replied with a smile, but I landed just right. He left out the parts with the fire, the screaming, and the woman's haunted eyes. The footage reached Isabel that evening, still in a hospital bed, her legs wrapped in gauze. She watched it again and again. Her rescuer, the man who vanished without a name. And in that blurry image, she saw something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. She reached for her phone and dialed a number she hadn't used in months. "Get me Marcus," she said. A pause. "I need to find someone." Continuing the story, here are: the morning after the derailment, Brookside was buzzing in a way Ethan hadn't experienced since the county fair came through 5 years ago. But this wasn't the kind of attention anyone wanted. Reporters had found their way into town, prowling for witnesses, trying to put a face to the anonymous rescuer whose actions had captivated the nation. Ethan avoided the news. He turned off his phone. Still, the story found its way to him. Local hero saves lives in train wreck. Unidentified man vanishes after heroic rescue. Lily's teacher pulled him aside at school drop-off. "We saw the video, Ethan. Was that really you?" He gave a half shrug. "Looks a little like me, maybe." But it was enough to confirm her suspicion. Word spread. At the grocery store, people stared longer than usual. At the gas station, the clerk refused his payment for a coffee. "On the house," he said, grinning. "Thanks for what you did." Ethan didn't know what to do with the attention. Every part of him recoiled from it. He hadn't saved anyone for recognition. He'd just reacted, like he always did, quietly, instinctively. At home, the front porch was no longer empty. Someone had left flowers, a thank you card, an envelope with no return address, just a single word written on the outside: gratitude. He opened it to find a drawing, crayon, amateur, but unmistakably of him dragging someone from fire. It was signed, "Thank you for saving my mommy, Eli, age 6. The weight of it settled on him like an anchor and a blessing all at once. Later that day, a knock came at the door. It was a reporter from Chicago, a young woman with sharp eyes and a notepad. She smiled when he opened the door. "Mr. Cole, I won't take much of your time." "Not interested." "You're being called a hero, you know that?" He began to shut the door. "Wait," she said quickly. "One of the women you saved. She's been asking about you. She's looking for you." Ethan froze. "What's her name?" he asked. "I'm not at liberty to say, but she's wealthy, from the Vance family." That name hit like a hammer. Isabel Vance, the woman from the train. But before he could say anything more, the reporter added, "She's looking for the man who saved her, that's all I know." She handed him a card and walked away. Ethan stared at it for a long time. Then he tore it in half. Days passed. The media noise began to fade, just a little. Another news story came along to steal the headlines, and Brookside slipped back into anonymity. Ethan was grateful. He returned to his usual routine: morning coffee, school drop-offs, handyman jobs when he could get them. His limp was improving, the bruises were fading, but something had shifted in him. At night, he found himself staring at the ceiling longer. Lily noticed, too. "You missed the train," she teased one evening. He chuckled. Not even a little. But truth be told, he missed the clarity he'd felt in that moment, when it all came down to survival, instinct, and one simple choice: help or don't. Everything else, money, fear, regret, had fallen away. And he missed her. The woman with the notebook. Isabel. He'd looked her up online, of course. It hadn't been hard. The Vance family's name was everywhere. Media, politics, tech, billionaires with legacy empires. Isabel had disappeared from the spotlight years ago. Rumors of breakdowns, rehab, family feuds. But the woman on the train hadn't seemed broken. She'd seemed lost. And Ethan, against his better judgment, wanted to know why. One morning, Lily found him scrolling through an old article on Isabel's charity work from 5 years ago. "Is she your friend?" He closed the laptop. "I don't know." But he wanted to. It came just after sunset. The landline, barely used, rang once, then twice. Ethan hesitated before answering. "Ethan Cole?" a voice asked. "Speaking." "This is Marcus Vale. I'm calling on behalf of Miss Isabel Vance." He almost hung up. "She's asked to speak with you personally. No cameras, no press, just a conversation." "How'd you get this number?" "I'm very good at my job," Marcus said without arrogance, and she was very insistent. Ethan said nothing. "You saved her life. She'd like to thank you in person." "I don't need thanking." There was a pause on the other end. "She said you might say that, but this isn't just about thanks. She has an offer, one that could affect your future and your daughter's." That stopped him cold. "What kind of offer?" "She'll explain if you're willing to meet." Ethan closed his eyes. His gut twisted. He didn't like being handled. But something about the tone, the quiet professionalism, made him pause. "Where?" "There's a private airstrip outside town. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. A short flight. That's all we ask." Ethan didn't say yes. He didn't say no either. After the call ended, he stared at the receiver, and for the first time since the wreck, he felt something stirring inside him. Curiosity, maybe even hope. Isabel Vance had never been good at asking for help. Born into a family where emotional vulnerability was considered a liability, she'd learned to armor herself in silence and detachment. Her world had always been one of luxury, but also of control. Her image, her movements, even her grief after her brother's death had all been stage managed by someone else. Until the train. That moment, burning, breathless, and blinding, was the first time in years she'd felt truly powerless. And he had been there. The man with ash-streaked cheeks and steady hands. No one had ever looked at her that way. Not as a name, not as a Vance, but simply as a human being in need. His eyes had been calm, focused. The way he moved, there was nothing rehearsed or performative. He hadn't saved her for the camera or for glory. He had simply acted. Even as paramedics arrived, she had kept looking for him, but he was gone. Later, from the hospital bed, she watched the grainy footage over and over, hitting pause at the exact frame where his face turned to the camera. She memorized the lines of his jaw, the quiet determination in his gaze. And she knew she owed him more than thanks. She owed him the truth. The morning after the call from Marcus Vale, Ethan rose before the sun. He sat in the kitchen drinking coffee, watching the shadows retreat from the walls. Lily was still asleep, her little dinosaur socks peeking out from beneath the blanket. He thought about not going. He thought about staying exactly where life was familiar, even if it was hard. But then he saw it. A white envelope had been slid under the front door sometime during the night. No postage, no name, just for Ethan and Lily. He opened it cautiously. Inside was a card. On the front, a watercolor of a sky just before sunrise. Inside, in delicate penmanship, was a note. You didn't ask for anything in return. That's why this matters. I believe in second chances. Please accept this as a step toward yours. Isabel. Below it was a ticket, a printed boarding pass to a private charter flight. One seat for him, one for Lily. Ethan stared at it for a long time. He had no intention of dragging Lily into anything uncertain, but this wasn't a sales pitch or a media stunt. This was personal. It felt sincere. Later that afternoon, he showed Lily the envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "A chance," Ethan replied. She beamed. The morning was thick with fog. Brookside looked like a forgotten dream as Ethan drove along the narrow back roads to the airstrip. Lily sat in the passenger seat, holding Rexy the dinosaur close to her chest. Her eyes were wide, curious, but she didn't ask many questions. She trusted him. When they arrived, Ethan was surprised to find the place empty, except for one man in a dark coat standing beside a small, sleek jet. "Mr. Cole," the man said. "I'm Marcus Vale." He extended a hand. Firm shake, calm eyes. Everything about him said, professional. "This is my daughter Lily," Ethan said. Marcus knelt slightly to meet her gaze. "It's an honor, Miss Cole." Lily giggled, and Ethan felt his guard soften. Just a little. They boarded the jet, stepping into a world unlike anything they'd known. Soft leather seats, warm lighting, and a quiet hum that made the world feel far away. As they settled in, Ethan noticed a familiar face seated at the rear of the cabin. Isabel. She stood slowly, still limping slightly. "Hi," she said, her voice softer than he remembered. Ethan nodded. "You really sent that letter?" "I did." He studied her for a long moment, and for the first time since the wreck, he smiled. The plane ascended smoothly, banking away from the sleepy fields of Brookside and into a cloud-streaked sky. Ethan sat stiffly in his seat, unsure what to make of the luxury around him. Every detail, soft lighting, whisper-quiet engines, artisanal snacks placed with precision, screamed wealth. Not just money, but old money, the kind that didn't flaunt itself because it didn't need to. Lily, meanwhile, was enchanted. "Dad, there's buttons on the chair." She poked at the controls, reclining and raising her seat, giggling as she did. Ethan smiled faintly. He didn't want to take this from her, but he couldn't shake the wariness that sat like a stone in his gut. Marcus Vale stood at the front of the cabin, reviewing something on a tablet. Eventually, he turned and walked over, sliding into the seat across from Ethan. "You have questions," Marcus said, calm and precise. "I have doubts," Ethan replied. "This whole thing, it's not normal." "True, but it's also not manipulative. Isabel doesn't want to trap you, she just wants to talk." "Talk," Ethan echoed. "And this jet was necessary for that?" Marcus offered a thin smile. "You'd be surprised how quickly sincerity is dismissed without context. The Vance family's name often precedes their intentions. Isabel wanted you to see that this wasn't a publicity stunt, that it was private." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "So why the personal interest because I pulled her out of a train wreck?" Marcus paused. "It's more than that. You reminded her of something, someone perhaps, that she thought she'd lost faith in. You acted without ego, without agenda. That's rare in her world." Ethan looked away, jaw tight. I didn't do it for recognition. And you're not being offered any, Marcus said firmly. Only the opportunity to hear what she has to say. What happens after that's entirely up to you. Ethan studied Marcus, trying to find cracks in the polished exterior, but there were none. All right, he finally said. I'll listen, that's all. Marcus nodded once. That's all she wants. And with that, the conversation ended, leaving Ethan staring out the window into the blue beyond. The flight lasted just under an hour. They landed on a private strip nestled in rolling green hills, with tall evergreens flanking both sides like royal sentinels. A black sedan waited at the end of the runway. The transition from plane to car was seamless, like the steps had been choreographed. As they drove, Ethan held Lily's hand. She pressed her nose to the window, wide-eyed. Where are we going? To meet someone, Ethan said. The estate that came into view wasn't just big, it was cinematic. Ivy-covered stone walls, spires, gardens bursting with color. Even in early spring, it looked more like a European chateau than a private residence. The car pulled up to the front steps. Waiting at the top was Isabel. This time she wasn't in a hospital gown or business clothes. She wore a light sweater and jeans. Her hair was down, wind-tousled, and her expression was uncertain, hopeful, but guarded. Ethan stepped out, helping Lily down before walking toward her. Hi, Isabel said softly. Hi, he returned. Lily tugged his hand. Is she the lady from the train? Isabel crouched to Lily's eye level. I am, and I owe your dad a very big thank you. You got hurt, Lily said, frowning. I did, but he saved me. Your dad's a hero. Ethan cleared his throat. Not a hero, just someone who did what needed to be done. Isabel rose slowly. Then I'm someone who needs to say thank you the right way. She led them inside, past tall arched doorways and floors that gleamed like mirrors. The house smelled like lavender and old books. They settled in a sunroom filled with light. Servants brought tea, but Ethan didn't touch his. I wanted to explain, Isabel began, not just about me, about why you're here. Ethan folded his arms. Go on. She took a breath, steadying herself. My name is Isabel Vance, and I wasn't supposed to be on that train. She looked out the window for a moment before continuing. I was on my way to disappear. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I wasn't running from danger, just from who I'd become. Ethan said nothing. My family, we're good at appearances, power, image, influence, but behind the curtain, we're just as broken as anyone else, maybe worse. My brother died 3 years ago, overdose, and I spiraled, not into addiction, but into numbness. I stopped believing in people, in good. She turned to face him. And then you pulled me from a burning train car, a stranger. You didn't hesitate. I didn't think, Ethan said. Exactly, she replied. You acted on instinct, and it changed everything. She reached into a folder and pulled out a photograph of her and a man in a military uniform. My brother, James, he used to say, if you've got more than you need, build a longer table, not a higher wall. That was before the money drowned him. She looked back at Ethan. I want to build that table, and I want you to help me. Ethan blinked. Me? I'm launching a new foundation, small at first, focused on direct, no-red-tape humanitarian response, natural disasters, housing for displaced families, veteran aid. I want someone to lead it who understands people, who doesn't care about headlines. Someone like you. Ethan's mind reeled. You saved my life, Ethan. Now I'm asking you to help me save others. He sat back, stunned. That's a hell of a thank you. Isabel smiled gently. It's not thanks. It's the beginning. Ethan never liked cameras. He didn't trust them. The way they framed moments without context, without emotion. Yet here he was on a television screen in department stores and diners, caught mid-action in grainy footage, dragging Isabel from fire and chaos. It had taken less than a week for the story to explode. One video taken from a phone by a dazed teenager at the crash site had surfaced on social media. Within hours, it was picked up by local news. By morning, national outlets were calling it the most heroic moment captured this year. The clip was short, 10 seconds, but it was enough. Enough to ignite hashtags, enough to get celebrity shares, enough to draw attention to a man who had done everything possible to stay invisible. Back in Brookside, Ethan's neighbors had turned into press agents. Strangers began stopping by the house. Lily's school received interview requests. Someone left a drone hovering above their yard. Ethan shut it all down. He refused interviews, declined calls, turned off every alert. But it didn't matter. He'd become a symbol. Marcus had warned him. When someone ordinary did something extraordinary, the world came running, first with flowers, then with expectations. That's why Isabel had arranged the private meeting. That's why she'd kept the cameras out of their conversations. She understood the weight of the spotlight. She had lived under it her whole life, and she had no intention of forcing him back into it. Days passed at the estate. What had started as a single meeting stretched into longer conversations, walks through the vineyard, quiet breakfasts. Ethan had expected an immediate pitch, but instead, Isabel gave him space. She showed him the grounds, introduced him to the skeleton crew of foundation staff already working behind the scenes. No speeches, no press kits, just people, kind, driven people. Lily, meanwhile, had taken to the place like it was her own castle. She made friends with the gardener's children, rode horses, learned how to say thank you in French from one of the chefs. Ethan watched her laugh more than she had in months. One evening, after Lily was in bed, Ethan found Isabel in the library, curled up with a book. He hesitated, then sat across from her. "You're not like I expected," he said. She smiled. "What did you expect?" "Someone colder, corporate, maybe a little more Vance." Her smile widened slightly. "I was. For a long time." "What changed?" "You did," she said softly. "That moment on the train. Something in me cracked open. I'd forgotten what real courage looked like, what selflessness looked like." Ethan looked away, uncomfortable. "I didn't do it for credit." "I know," she said. "That's why it meant something." They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling low between them. "I don't know if I belong in this world," Ethan said finally. She looked up. "Then maybe it's time we build a new one. Together." A week after their arrival, Isabel made it official. She invited Ethan to the formal conference room, though formal felt like the wrong word for the elegant, sun-filled space overlooking the hills. Marcus was already there, papers neatly arranged on the table. "This is just an outline," Isabel said. "You can say no to any of it." Ethan glanced over the documents. The proposal was direct, a leadership role in the newly established Coal Foundation for Humanity, full autonomy, control over staffing, immediate funding for 3 pilot programs. The salary was generous but not obscene. It came with relocation assistance, housing, and a trust fund for Lily's education. But more than that, it came with purpose. "You want me to run this whole thing?" he asked. "With my support, yes," Isabel said. "You've seen what the world does in a crisis. You've been in it. I want someone who knows how to act, not just talk." Ethan took a deep breath. His instincts battled within him. One side wary of becoming someone else's project, the other hopeful, aching to do more than just survive. "This is huge," he murmured. "Not as huge as the difference you could make," Isabel replied. "You saved lives. I'm just giving you the tools to keep doing it." He looked up at her. "And what do you get out of this?" She hesitated, then answered with honesty. "Redemption, maybe even peace." He nodded slowly. "I'll think about it." "Take all the time you need," Isabel said, though something in her eyes suggested she hoped he'd already made up his mind. If Ethan had doubts about uprooting their lives, Lily had none. From the moment she stepped foot onto the estate grounds, she blossomed like a flower after the first spring rain. She rode ponies with the stable kids, explored hedge mazes with wild curiosity, and named every koi fish in the garden pond. Her favorite was a golden one she called Captain Finn. Ethan watched her from a distance sometimes, marveling at how adaptable she was. Children had that gift, the ability to accept joy without overthinking it, to trust the world hadn't changed its mind about loving them. One morning, as Ethan poured coffee in the estate's airy kitchen, Lily came in wearing a lavender dress someone on the staff had clearly picked out. "Daddy," she said, spinning, "look how I twirl." He chuckled. "You're going to give me a heart attack dancing around like that." "Isabel says I could help name the buildings for the foundation," she beamed. "And maybe I can be the junior boss." "Is that a real thing?" he asked, amused. "It is now," Isabel said, entering with a breakfast tray. "I figured someone should keep you in line." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Didn't know you were recruiting child executives." "She's got vision," Isabel teased, "and charm." Ethan watched Lily laugh, light bouncing off her curls, and felt the deep ache of something he hadn't known he was missing, seeing his daughter free of worry. But not everything was effortless. One evening, while walking the estate's southern trail with Isabel, Ethan finally said what had been weighing on him. "This feels too easy." She stopped, turning toward him. "You think this is easy?" she asked, not angrily, but with sincerity. "I mean, not this," he gestured around them, "just accepting this. I spent the last 8 years fighting for every bill, every job. Now I'm supposed to believe I belong in this world of staff and suits and multi-million-dollar ventures." She was quiet for a moment. "Do you remember how calm you were on that train?" He nodded slowly. "That's because chaos made sense to you. But peace." She met his eyes. "That's foreign. That's what's scaring you." Ethan looked away. "I don't trust comfort. I've seen how fast it disappears." "So have I," Isabel replied. "That's why I want to build something that lasts. Not just for me, for people like you, like Lily." He nodded. "Still feels like a dream." She smiled, gently. Then let's make it real. That night, Ethan stood by Lily's door a little longer than usual, watching her sleep peacefully. Maybe Isabel was right. Maybe it was time to trust peace. It wasn't long before the formal invitation came. Ethan was asked to accompany Isabel to a private summit in Geneva, an informal gathering of global philanthropists, innovators, and humanitarian leaders. The purpose to introduce the Cole Foundation as a new initiative aimed at radical, responsive compassion. The idea of flying to Switzerland in a private jet, speaking to billionaires, was enough to make Ethan consider hiding under the nearest piece of furniture. But Lily insisted it was an adventure, and Isabel promised he wouldn't be alone. The jet that took them was even sleeker than the first, outfitted like a moving command center, screens, charts, and folders with operational plans laid out by Marcus and his team. "You'll be fine," Marcus said. "Just speak like you always do, plain, honest, real. That's what they need to hear." The flight was smooth, but Ethan's nerves weren't. He stared at the clouds, heart pounding. What if he made a fool of himself? What if this was all a mistake? But when they landed and he stepped onto the tarmac of Geneva's private terminal, something shifted. The air felt crisp, clean, and in the distance the city shimmered. Modern glass buildings nestled alongside centuries-old stone, a place where the past and future coexisted. A driver greeted them with practiced grace. As they approached the venue, a domed structure shaped like a rising sun, Ethan realized something. This wasn't a test. It was the beginning, and for the first time since the wreck, he walked forward without hesitation. Ethan hadn't expected the matriarch of the Vance family to be waiting at the summit. He'd heard her name, of course, Eleanor Vance, whispers in Forbes profiles and legacy interviews. She was a legend in media circles, known for her empire and her silence. Rarely seen, even more rarely heard. Her presence was like gravity, quiet but unmovable. And yet, there she was. Eleanor waited in a private lounge at the summit, seated beside a grand window that overlooked Lake Geneva. She wore a black cashmere wrap, her silver hair neatly pinned. Her sharp gaze met Ethan's as he entered, and she stood slowly, each movement deliberate. "Mr. Cole," she said with a voice like tempered steel. "At last." Ethan swallowed hard and extended a hand. "Ma'am." She shook it firmly but not forcefully. Isabel stood to the side, her posture tense. Ethan noticed it immediately, how she clasped her hands, how her jaw clenched ever so slightly. "Sit," Eleanor said, motioning to the chairs across from her. They sat. "I understand my daughter has made you a rather generous offer," she said, folding her hands in her lap. "She has. And you haven't answered yet." "No," Ethan said honestly, still thinking. Eleanor nodded. "Good. Only fools rush into responsibility." She studied him, long and silent. Then she said, "Tell me something, Mr. Cole. What do you want?" Ethan blinked. The question startled him. What?" "Don't tell me what Isabel wants. Don't tell me what your daughter needs. Tell me what you want." The room held its breath. After a moment, Ethan answered, "Peace. A place where I don't have to fight every day to survive. A future for my daughter that doesn't rely on me breaking myself to build it." Eleanor nodded slowly, her eyes softening. "Then you'd better get used to making decisions like a builder," she said, "because what you're standing on is the foundation of something bigger than either of us." She stood. I'm not here to approve or disapprove. I trust Isabel's instincts, but I wanted to see the man who pulled her out of the fire. She walked to the door, paused, and said over her shoulder, "Turns out he doesn't disappoint." The summit was a blur of panels, private briefings, and late-night conversations that made Ethan feel like he'd entered another dimension. He met climate scientists, educators, frontline medics, and even a former prime minister who spoke to him like an old friend. But it wasn't the powerful people that left an impression. It was the stories. He listened to a woman from Kenya describe rebuilding a village from floodwaters. He spoke with a veteran who'd turned trauma into advocacy. He shared coffee with a school principal from a war-torn region who risked his life to teach children under a tree. Each story left its mark. By the third day, the purpose of his presence was clear. Isabel wasn't asking him to sit at the table. She was asking him to build it. The Cole Foundation wouldn't just be a name. It would be a call to action. Nimble, responsive, humans. "I want you to choose your team," Isabel told him. "Not from resumes, from stories. Who's living it? Who knows what healing actually looks like?" Ethan nodded, the pieces falling into place. The job wasn't about oversight. It was about compassion in motion, a test of heart, not pedigree. And suddenly, the path before him didn't feel so foreign anymore. But even as things moved forward, Ethan felt the tug of uncertainty. At night, in the quiet of his guest suite, he would sit on the balcony and wonder if he was becoming something he wouldn't recognize. Could he keep his integrity in a world that measured success in media reach and donor dollars? One evening, Isabel found him alone. "You're restless," she said gently. "Am I that obvious?" To someone who knows the look, he sighed. "What if I lose myself in all this? The suits, the speeches, the cameras. I've spent so long just trying to stay real." "You being here is real," she said, "because you keep asking those questions." Ethan turned toward her. "Do you ever worry about becoming one of them? The people who say the right things but stop feeling them?" Isabel was quiet for a moment. "I've already been one of them," she admitted. "It took a train wreck to remind me I could be something else." She sat beside him. "I don't want to lose who I am either. That's why I need you near, because you see the cracks and you remind me to care about them." Ethan looked out over the lake. Maybe leadership wasn't about certainty. Maybe it was about learning to carry doubt and still choose to move forward. The formal dinner at the Vance estate was the kind of gathering Ethan had only seen in movies. Long dining tables with crystal glassware, courses brought out like timed performances, and conversations dipped in subtext and strategy. The chandelier above shimmered with the weight of old money. Ethan arrived in a dark suit borrowed from Marcus, tailored in ways that felt unnatural. Isabel met him at the foyer, radiant in a navy dress that brought out her striking presence without betraying her vulnerability. "You clean up well," she teased. "Still feels like I'm playing dress-up," he muttered. Inside the dining hall, Eleanor Vance presided at the head of the table, flanked by extended family, advisors, and a few legacy allies who had known Isabel since childhood. The Vance name might have stood for innovation in media, but at this table, tradition reigned supreme. As Ethan took his seat beside Isabel, he felt the weight of every glance. They all knew who he was. The man who saved the heiress, the outsider. "Ethan, was it?" One man, Harold, a distant Vance cousin, asked. So what's your background? Law, finance, construction, and logistics, Ethan said plainly. Worked the docks, managed warehouses. The table fell quiet for a beat. Well, another guest offered, it's certainly a unique leap from blue-collar to global philanthropy. Ethan took a slow sip of water. Maybe the world could use more people who've been on the ground. Eleanor smiled faintly at the response. Throughout the evening, Isabel remained close but careful. She let Ethan speak when he chose to, redirected conversations when they veered toward judgment. It was diplomacy wrapped in intimacy. By dessert, the tone had softened. A few of the guests warmed to him, impressed not by polish but by candor. Later, as the dishes were cleared, Eleanor stood and lifted her glass. "To unexpected beginnings," she said. Ethan returned the gesture. To begin, indeed. After dinner, the guests filtered out, leaving the estate quiet again. Ethan stepped outside onto the marble terrace, loosening his tie and breathing in the cool night air. The lake reflected the moon in soft ripples, and somewhere in the distance, a nightbird called. Isabel joined him a few moments later, barefoot, heels in hand. "I thought you handled that well," she said. "I kept waiting for someone to ask if I'd brought my own silverware." She laughed, full and real. They walked down the stone path toward the gardens, silence settling between them like a blanket. The night air was crisp, and the scent of lavender lingered in the hedges. "I hate those dinners," Isabel admitted. "Why host them?" "Because power still respects legacy, and if I want the foundation to succeed, I need to show them we're serious." Ethan looked at her. "Are we?" She stopped. "Are you?" He didn't answer right away. They reached the edge of the garden where the path overlooked the vineyard below. Stars glittered above them, unbothered by human politics. "I've never felt more out of place," Ethan said quietly. "And I've never felt more grounded," Isabel replied. He turned to her. "Why me?" She took a breath. "Because you see people. You don't see profit or exposure or reputation. You just see pain and move toward it. That's rare, and I'm tired of rarity being wasted." Their eyes met. The moment stretched. Isabel reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. "I'm still figuring this out," he said. "So am I." They stood there, not speaking, hand in hand. Two people trying to believe that broken things could become something beautiful again. The next morning, Ethan awoke to Marcus knocking at his door. "You need to see this," Marcus said, tablet in hand. Ethan rubbed his eyes and sat up, taking the device. The headline glared in bold letters, "Savior or Stunt." Inside, the mysterious rise of Ethan Cole. Beneath it, screenshots of the train rescue, side-by-sides of Ethan in work clothes and a tailored suit, and speculative analysis on his sudden influence. "They're calling me a plant," Ethan muttered. "They're calling you everything," Marcus said. "Grifter, opportunist, secret boyfriend. Some are even saying the crash was staged." Ethan laughed bitterly. "What kind of lunatic—" "Welcome to the internet," Marcus said grimly. Isabel appeared at the doorway moments later, phone in hand. "I'm handling it," she said. "We've already flagged misinformation. Legal's on standby, but it's going to get louder before it gets quieter." Ethan scrolled the comments. Dozens, hundreds, picking apart his past, his parenting, his motives. Lily's name was trending. That stopped him cold. "No," he said, "leave me out of it, but not my daughter." Isabel stepped forward. "We'll protect her. I promise." Ethan stood, eyes steely. "Then let's make this official. If I'm going to be in this, I want control. No PR games, no spin, just the truth." Isabel smiled. "Good, because that's exactly what the world needs from us." And just like that, Ethan chose not to retreat, but to fight. Not for fame, for integrity, for Lily, for something real. The media frenzy didn't die down as quickly as Ethan had hoped. Despite Isabel's team working around the clock to scrub falsehoods and protect their privacy, the narrative had taken on a life of its own. Every new article, every viral tweet, every out-of-context quote only added fuel to the fire. So Ethan made a choice. He packed 2 bags and booked a flight home to Brookside. Not because he was running, but because he needed to remember who he was before the world began defining him. Isabel didn't argue. She only said, "If you need space, take it. But this door will always be open." He took Lily and returned to the modest house that still carried the scent of old floorboards and familiar coffee. Neighbors peeked through blinds. The grocery clerk hesitated before saying, "It's good to see you back, Ethan." "Yeah," Ethan said, offering a tight smile. "Good to be back." But it wasn't the same. The quiet that had once been comforting now felt like hiding. Brookside hadn't changed, but he had. The man who had left on a commuter train months ago had returned wearing weightier questions and larger dreams. He looked around his living room at the worn couch and cracked window frame. This place held so many memories. But was it still holding his future? It was a week into their stay in Brookside when Lily surprised him. They were walking home from the corner store, Lily skipping ahead, her coat bouncing with each hop. The evening air was crisp, and golden light poured through the thinning autumn trees. Ethan had been quiet most of the walk. "You're thinking too loud," Lily said, stopping on the sidewalk. He blinked. "Thinking too loud?" "Yeah, your brain's making your face all squinty." He laughed, the tension easing slightly. Lily turned serious, her brows furrowing. "You're not happy here anymore, are you?" The question hit him harder than expected. "It's not that I'm unhappy," he said. "It's just, I'm not sure I belong here now." "Is it because of Isabel?" "No," he said honestly. "It's because there's something bigger out there, something I might be able to build. For us. For others." Lily tilted her head. "Then why are we here?" Ethan sighed. "Because I got scared." Lily walked up to him and took his hand. "You always tell me that being brave isn't about not being scared," she said. "It's about doing the hard thing anyway." He looked at her, stunned. "Did you come up with that?" he asked. She smiled. "Maybe." They walked the rest of the way in silence. But Ethan's thoughts were no longer tangled. He had his answer. The next morning, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a pen in hand. In front of him lay the original proposal from Isabel, the offer he had once left unsigned. He reviewed it again, not as a man drowning in uncertainty, but as someone who had begun to understand his worth. Every clause, every condition now felt like an invitation, not a burden. He signed it. Then he picked up the phone and called Marcus. "I'm in," Ethan said. "Let's build something that matters." The return to the estate was quiet. No fanfare. Just Isabel standing at the top of the steps, with a look of calm that bordered on joy. "I was starting to worry," she said. "I had to be sure," he replied. They walked side by side through the grand hallway. Staff nodded, doors opened, and something in the air had shifted. It no longer felt like someone else's world. It felt like a place Ethan belonged. That afternoon, he met with the core team. He introduced new ideas, structured a plan for their first mission deployment, and began sketching out what the Cole Foundation would look like from the ground up. He wasn't just a name anymore. He was a founder, a leader, a father who had chosen not just survival, but legacy. Returning to the estate after signing the offer didn't feel like a retreat. It felt like arriving at the beginning of something permanent. The suite Ethan and Lily were offered now bore subtle touches of familiarity. A crayon drawing of Rexy taped to the mini fridge. A blanket Lily had kept since she was 4 folded on her new bed. Photographs of Ethan and Lily, real moments, now rested in frames on the mantel. It wasn't the house that changed. It was how it held them. Ethan spent his first days officially on the job, walking the grounds not as a guest, but as someone preparing to shape a legacy. He met with gardeners, chefs, security teams, not to instruct, but to understand. He didn't want to build an empire from above. He wanted to build a home from within. Lily adjusted effortlessly. Her days were filled with play and learning, supervised by a mix of tutors and local kids, invited in to keep her world grounded. One evening, while helping her with a math worksheet, Lily looked up and asked, "Do you think Mom would like it here?" Ethan paused, then smiled gently. "She'd love it," he said, "especially seeing how happy you are." Brookside would always be part of them, but this was where their future was unfolding, and that was enough. The Cole Foundation's inaugural mission came unexpectedly. A coastal town in the Philippines was hit by a violent typhoon. Homes destroyed, families displaced, infrastructure collapsed. Within hours of the storm passing, the team activated its first rapid response deployment. Ethan was on the ground within 2 days. He hadn't planned to go himself. But when Marcus showed him the scope of devastation, he knew he couldn't lead from a distance. The team landed on a flooded runway, wading through ankle-deep water to reach temporary shelters already overrun by survivors. Medical aid was limited, power was intermittent, morale was crumbling. Ethan rolled up his sleeves, donned a vest with the Cole Foundation emblem, and began doing what he had always done, helping. He handed out bottled water. He carried elderly survivors to shelter. He held a child's hand as she cried for her missing mother. He wasn't above any task. Isabel, coordinating from headquarters, sent updates through satellite relay. "We've just confirmed airlift supply chains," she said. "UNICEF is watching this deployment closely." Ethan wasn't thinking about optics. He was thinking about the grandmother who hadn't eaten in 3 days, the young boy trying to salvage books from rubble, the medic who broke down when Ethan offered to take her shift so she could rest. For Ethan, this was the work, raw, real, needed, and for the first time since the train wreck, he didn't just feel useful, he felt fulfilled. When Ethan returned from the mission, he was exhausted. His clothes carried the scent of sweat, salt, and ash. His voice was hoarse and his limbs sore. But his heart was full. Isabel met him at the terminal, arms crossed, trying to mask her concern. "You look like you've been through war," she said, half joking. "Feels like it." She stepped closer, her eyes scanning his face. "You're different." "So are you," he said. That night, after Lily was asleep, they sat together on the terrace, wine glasses in hand. The stars blinked lazily above them, and the air smelled of honeysuckle and possibility. Ethan leaned back, letting the silence wrap around them. "You know," he said, "when I first saw you on that train, I thought you were running." "I was," Isabel admitted, "but not anymore." He looked at her. "Why not?" "Because you stopped me. Even before you pulled me out, you saw me. No one had done that in a long time." Ethan didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached over and gently placed his hand on hers. "I wasn't trying to be a hero." "I know," she whispered. "That's what makes you one." Their hands remained joined. No declarations, no need for urgency. Just the soft, unfolding trust of two people discovering that love, real love, comes quietly. The grand hall was filled with anticipation. Representatives from international relief organizations, educators, health workers, and press from around the world had gathered at the Cole Foundation's global launch. The stage was minimalist. No flashing lights, no frills. Just a podium, a backdrop of photographs from the Foundation's first missions, and the man who made it all possible. Ethan stood backstage, adjusting the single button on his suit jacket. He hated public speaking, always had. But this moment wasn't about comfort, it was about conviction. Lily stood beside him, now wearing her own little pin with the Foundation logo. She held his hand tightly. "You got this, Dad," she said, eyes shining. He bent and kissed her forehead. "Couldn't have done any of this without you." Marcus gave him the nod. It was time. As Ethan walked onto the stage, applause greeted him. He waited until it quieted, then began, his voice steady. "I wasn't born into privilege. I wasn't trained for leadership, and I definitely wasn't supposed to be standing here today. But sometimes the path to purpose isn't paved. It's carved by choices, by pain, by resilience." He spoke of the train, of the strangers, of Isabel, of how one act of courage sparked something larger than himself. "The Cole Foundation is not about me," he said. "It's about every person who chooses to help when no one is watching, every parent who sacrifices, every community that rebuilds, every child who dreams." The hall was silent, riveted. "And if you're wondering what kind of legacy you can build from the ashes of a broken world, I'm here to tell you it starts with one step towards someone else's pain." When he finished, they rose in applause. But Ethan didn't smile for the cameras. He smiled at Lily, at Isabel, at the life that had found him in the wreckage. The weeks following the launch brought a new rhythm to Ethan's life. His days were full. Meetings with project leads, planning missions, speaking with communities across continents. But unlike the frantic scrambling of his past, this new life moved with intention. He traveled with purpose, slept with clarity, laughed more. Lily had adapted to their evolving world with grace. She attended a hybrid school on the estate grounds, where diversity and empathy were part of the curriculum. Her curiosity grew, as did her circle of friends. Ethan often found her writing letters to kids in the places they helped. "You're making pen pals?" he asked once. "No," she said, "I'm making heart friends." At night, Ethan and Isabel shared quiet dinners, soft music in the background, conversation that wound from policy to poetry. They weren't in a rush. What they had was growing slowly, like roots settling deep. Isabel, too, had changed. The guarded heiress who once rode that train was now a woman with conviction, driven not by guilt but by vision. They supported each other, not in grand gestures, but in simple, everyday solidarity. They were no longer just survivors. They were architects of change, and they were in it together. The sun rose over the hills like a promise. It was Foundation Day, 1 year since the Coal Foundation was formally launched. The estate was alive with movement. Guests arrived from all over the world, not for pomp, but to share stories, ideas, and dreams made real. Ethan walked through the crowd, pausing to greet friends and field workers, shaking hands with old warehouse colleagues who now manage supply chains for global operations. Everywhere he looked, he saw proof that something extraordinary had grown from something tragic. But the heart of it all was still Lily. She ran through the orchard, barefoot, hair flying, chasing butterflies with 2 other kids. Her laughter echoed across the grounds. Isabel watched from the steps, smiling. She wore a linen dress and held a notebook, always writing, always imagining. As the event wound down, Ethan took the stage again, not to give another speech, but to introduce the real future, the people his team had empowered to lead their own communities. Young leaders stepped forward. Medical interns, engineers, educators. Ethan stepped back, letting them shine. Later that night, under the stars, Ethan and Isabel sat beside the fire pit while Lily roasted marshmallows. "You built something real," Isabel whispered. "We did," Ethan replied. They clinked glasses, ginger ale for her, black coffee for him. Not to celebrate an end, but to mark the beginning of something beautiful. Their legacy was no longer a dream. It was in motion.